two different things: word level stress and sentence level stress. Sentence level stress answers the question, what? In a sentence, which words do you stress over other words for you to sound natural? And word level stress answers the question, how? If you want to stress a word, what exactly do you actually do? Do you stress all the syllables, or do you only stress one of them? Or is it some of the syllables, but not all of them? The point of my last video was to show you how syllables get stressed, the technical things you have to do, the changes in pitch contour. And while it's good for that, and I did give you some examples, in fact 6 different cases of when you would stress words and when you would not, I was mixing the what and the how of Mandarin stress. In this video, we're going to focus specifically on the how, on word level stress, and I'm going to give you some of the guidelines that I already gave you, plus a few more in more detail. So some things are quite obvious, like if you have a one-syllable word and you want to stress that, well, you just stress that syllable because there's only one syllable in a one-syllable word. But for multi-syllable words, what exactly do you do? The rule is that you stress the first syllable, no matter what, and then the rest of the syllables, whether they are stressed, depends on what type of word it is. Alright, so let's start with question words. In my last video, I said that you basically have to stress the head of the word. But after uploading the video, I figured out that the head turns out to always just be the first syllable. And that, that aligns with what I said earlier, that the first syllable of any word, when you stress it, is always stressed. So what you need to get out of that is basically just stress the first syllable in question words and de-stress the rest of them. So for the sake of completeness, I'm also including some single syllable question words, like who, 谁, and an informal way to say where in the Beijing area, 哪儿. So it has 2 words, but it's actually 1 syllable, and that's because of this thing called 儿化, or rhoticization, which I will cover in another video. But moving on to what you want to see, which are the multisyllable question words. Some of them actually, they don't get their other syllables de-stressed, they just have the 5th tone for those other syllables. It's like an unstressed 4th tone, or the tone of it kind of gets absorbed into the previous syllable. So here we have what, 什么, how, 怎么, and which, 哪个. There are some other question words that use both the 5th tone and unstressed tones, like regular unstressed tones, and those are when and why, 什么时候 and 为什么. I'm not saying 什么时候. The 时 in when is a rising tone, but it only rises a little bit. We don't say 什么时候, but 什么时候. And then the green syllables, those are the 5th tones. So 什么时候. And for why, 为什么, not 为什么, but 为什么. And then, of course, there are some question words that only have the stressed and unstressed syllables and no 5th tones. So 哪里 for where. It's less colloquial in Beijing, but a lot of people say 哪里 for where. And if you want to learn standard Chinese, then perhaps this is the one you should say. 哪里. I'm not saying 哪里. 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 What time? 几点. 几点. I'm not saying 几点. 几点 like that, but 几点. 几点. For why, here's a more formal way to say why. 为何. I'm not saying 为何, but 为何. 为何. For how, here's another way you can say how. It's a little bit more formal than 怎么. It's 怎样. And if you want to stress it, it's more like 怎样 rather than 怎样. 怎样. Yang takes the 4th tone, but we de-stress it. 怎样. And then finally, how. 如何. This is another formal-ish way of saying how, and you can de-stress or you can stress the final syllable 和. So 如何 or 如何 are both okay. And actually for a lot of these words, you can kind of say both of them. You can stress it or de-stress it, but to me it sounds more natural when you de-stress the second syllable. Okay, so let's move on to loanwords. The rule is that you stress everything. There are exceptions, and I'll go over that, but look at these words. These follow the rule. 香槟 is champagne. We don't say 香槟, but 香槟, it's flat throughout. 香槟, champagne. 博客, it's not 博客, 博客, de-stressing it, but 博客, fully pronouncing the fourth tone on 客. This means blog, 博客. 巴松 for bassoon. I'm not saying 巴松, like, de-stressing the second syllable. It's flat throughout, 巴松. And then 曲奇. 曲奇 is cookie. It's kind of a technical way to say cookie, and most people, or a lot of people, actually say 饼干 instead for that. The classic children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, is translated with 饼干 instead of 曲奇, but I guess if you want to be really specific and say that it's a cookie, like, that sweet type of pastry and not a cracker, then 曲奇 is okay as well. But anyway, loanwords, yeah, you want to stress everything. And you can actually find a list of a lot of the loanwords that are used, and that's on Wikipedia. And I'm sure there are other lists that you can find. So now moving on to the exceptions for the loanwords. For 3-syllable words, a lot of the time, if the second syllable, like the middle syllable, if it's a fourth tone, if it's falling, then you want to de-stress it. So it's not for everything. Like some words, they don't do this, but the fourth tone tends to get de-stressed in this sort of environment. So 巧克力 means chocolate, and 麦克风 means microphone. I'm not saying 巧克力, 麦克风, but 巧克力, 麦克风. And actually notice I used the green characters rather than the red ones, because I actually believe the de-stressing here goes even further than just regular de-stressing. It's straight up fifth tone. Like the 克, it doesn't even sound like it's falling. It just gets absorbed into the 巧克, the 巧. So 巧克力, 巧 is a third tone, so 巧克力. It's actually very, very light, the 克 sound. So definitely don't say 巧克力. 麦克风, same thing. 麦克风 or 麦克风, but definitely not 麦克风. That sounds a little bit too harsh. So for some words that are from languages that have, say, like the letter S next to, say, a T, like st, that sound in English, when it's translated or transliterated into Chinese, the sound that has the s or sh sound in it gets de-stressed. And usually this is, you can kind of regularly de-stress it, but most of the time it's more like a fifth tone sort of thing. For example, 凡士林, 凡士林, I'm pronouncing the vowel here, the 是. This means Vaseline, and you can actually kind of say 凡士林, just making the vowel in 是 really short. And I'm not saying 凡士林 with the fully stressed syllable, it's 凡士林. 波士顿, Boston. I'm not saying 波士顿, but 波士顿. The next one is 阿司匹林. 阿司匹林. The s should be first tone, but actually it's de-stressed, and it actually goes even further than that. The sound is completely gone, actually, for most people when they say it. So it's not 阿司匹林, but 阿司匹林. Like as, that is the first syllable, and you use two characters to write that, but it's one syllable. 阿司匹林. And of course that means aspirin. So for some, this picture right here, I think it's quite fitting because the topic is foreign names. So for some foreign names, especially like longer ones, you might actually start to follow a foreign stress pattern. And it's not that you stress one syllable, it's that you stress everything until that syllable, and then everything after that kind of falls off. So for instance, this is Dostoevsky. 陀思妥耶夫斯基。陀思妥耶夫斯基。I'm not saying 陀思妥耶夫斯基, but rather 陀思妥耶夫斯基. Now, let's talk about idioms, 成语. So a lot of these are going to be 4-word idioms, but actually in Chinese, you might get 5-word idioms as well, and 6-word, 7-word, 8-word idioms. And for instance, here's a list of 5-word idioms that I just found on the internet. So idioms, what you do is you want to stress everything. But in a certain case, basically if you want to show that you're emotionally affected by it, or you're angry or you're excited, or basically anytime you want to put an exclamation point after the idiom, you would stress the first syllable and de-stress the other ones. Or you would stress everything but overstress the first syllable, so really emphasize that. For instance, 莫名其妙. Like anytime you say an idiom, even if you're emotionally affected by it, you can stress everything and not overstress the first syllable. Just say it, straight through, like 莫名其妙. And that means odd, or like it's peculiar, inexplicable. That's what it means. 莫名其妙. 莫名其妙. Like that's how you would overstress the first syllable and still stress the other ones. Or you can stress the first one and de-stress the other ones. 莫名其妙. And the next one, 画蛇添足, literally draw snake, add feet. It means being extra, like you're doing, too much and you really should tone it down. 画蛇添足. If you want to stress it, like as an exclamation, you could de-stress the last 3 characters. 画蛇添足. 真是画蛇添足. They're being so extra, like, that's the type of feeling that I get from that stress pattern. And you can actually hear this man on YouTube saying 画蛇添足 by overstressing the first syllable and stressing everything else as well.
BBC 在这儿添油加醋，画蛇添足。
Now we're going to talk about repeated verbs. I already talked about this, but basically anytime you have a repeated verb, like 看看, the second verb is de-stressed. But actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So if you have medial 一 or 不, you de-stress everything regularly. 吃不吃, that means, are you going to eat or not? I'm not saying 吃不吃, but 吃不吃. And the medial 不 is also de-stressed, so 吃不吃. 谈一谈, to have a discussion for a little bit, 谈一谈, let's talk it out, I'm not saying 谈一谈, but 谈一谈, de-stressing everything after the first 谈. 写不写, are you going to write or not? Write or not, I'm not saying 写不写, but 写不写. And 试一试, instead of 试一试, for, try it on, like, or try it, or test it a bit. So actually here I have the graphs again, so I'm actually going to graph pitch over time, so you know what I mean. 吃, that's first tone. 不, usually it would, look like this, a falling tone, but because it's de-stressed, it starts lower. 吃不, instead of 吃不, 吃不, 吃, and then the first tone is lower. 吃不吃, and regularly it would be high up here, but 吃不吃. 谈一谈, instead of 谈一谈. Sorry, that line's not straight, but you know what I mean. 写不写, so here's a low falling 写不写. So instead of 写不 and then 写, instead of 写不写, it's 写不写. 试一试. The first one, it is stressed, so it starts up high. 试一试. And then the 一 becomes second tone because we're using a fourth tone after that with the 试. So 试 一是 instead of 是一是 we don't peak as high. So 试一试 instead of 试一试. So I hope these graphs are going to help you. And I have more to come. The thing about repeated verbs is if you don't have medial 一 or 不, you actually want to fully de-stress it and use fifth tone. So instead of saying 吃 like stressed, unstressed, it's 吃 like fully unstressed using the fifth tone. And I'll have a video on fifth tone later. But for the third tone, if the word is third tone, then you actually do de-stress it regularly instead of using the fifth tone. So for 写写, I'm not saying 写写, because 写写, that's what it would sound like if you use the fifth tone. But instead it's 写写, not 写写, stressing everything, or 写写 using fifth tone, but stressing the first one and de-stressing the second one regularly. 写写. So the graphs, real quick. 吃 and fifth tone, it kind of starts at a third tone level, but it's very short. 吃 here. 谈谈 here. 写. Actually, because the second 写 is a third tone, the first one has tone sandhi and it becomes rising. So 写 and then 写. Third tone de-stressed kind of looks like that. 写写. And 试试. So the first one is stressed and the second one is not de-stressed fourth tone but fifth tone. 试试. So, a really short low sound. 试试. Alright, so that wraps up my video for today. There are some other things that I'm going to talk about, like physical objects, abstract verbs, verbs that take direct objects within the verb, in other words, separable verbs, and all sorts of other things in my next video, because I can't talk about everything in one, otherwise it'll get too long. But I hope it helps you. Just follow these rules and you'll sound a lot more native than people who just read the pinyin and pronounce everything, straight through with stress on everything. If the graphs help you, I'll keep doing that. I might even do more graphs. The thing about Chinese tone is sometimes it's really quite fluid, and you should just listen to how native speakers say the word and just say the word that way. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching, and if you found value, please give me a like. Have a nice day.